Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Dad's Planning Politics. Hi, Freddie.
Hey, Mark Phibbs, how are you doing, Mr. Mark Phibbs?
Good,
How are
thank
things
you.
for you?
Very good.
It's very
It's
good. It's very
been nice
good.
weather this morning in Sydney, then it poured with rain and got very cold again.
I mean, I think we're okay with the cold though, because I've heard that there's going to be very good snow coming up soon. Just to do some small talk before we get into the deep stuff, and I think that you're aware, obviously, that we're heading off to the snow on Wednesday, so maybe our listeners can be aware as well.
I hope
So
it's good.
that's
First
exciting.
time in Australian snow for a long time for me.
For you, yes, for you. So that's, giving a little insight into how he lives his life. But let's get into the politics, shall we? So today we're really just going to be focusing on Ukraine and everything that's been happening there and Trump's use of his diplomatic sway, I suppose, to organize different summits, to organize different meetings with all the European leaders and center the whole thing around Washington, even though obviously the war and the conflict is happening thousands of miles away, which I think is a particular skill to center the whole thing around the American interference and American role in the conflicts. I don't know what you have to say about that, but
Well,
what are your thoughts?
let's step back for those listeners who maybe everyone's up to date with this, but in case you weren't, there's a summit that occurred on Sunday between Putin and Trump in Alaska at a US
I thought you meant to step back way further than that. I was planning on stepping back, like when
where
Crimea was annexed.
we
I
can.
thought it would be helpful to I'll just say
Oh,
quickly,
sure.
because apparently you had a different timeline than what I had. For those of you who don't know, Putin illegally in 2012, I think, initiated a process which ended in the annexation of Crimea, an illegal annexation of Ukrainian territory. And that was not agreed to by Ukraine, it's not agreed to by anyone else, but it happened, right? And ever since then, Russia had been building its strength, etc., to get to the point where they were when they launched the full-scale ground invasion, which is still continuing today and encroaching on more land. And so now we've gotten to the point where, like international leaders and names are saying, how do we end this conflict? And is there a way that a redistribution of land could be the way to fix it and the resolution? But there's been lots of discussions around that. Yeah, last week, as you were saying, Trump held a summit in Alaska. Now continue.
Yes, so they had a summit on Sunday in Alaska, and Alaska was sold to the US hundreds of years ago in a deal where Russia was paid for Alaska. So it's the point of the US which is actually closest to Russia, which is interesting. Trump made the mistake to say he was flying to Russia for the summit, even though it's a state of the US, right? This is what's so funny about the whole thing. And so they had the summit
But
on.
wouldn't he be flying anyway because it's so far away?
He'd be flying anyway, but the fact that he said he was flying to Russia as opposed to
He
flying
did.
to Alaska in the US, right? And so
Well, can
anyway,
I just say quickly, can I interject and say that for someone who you kind of regard as being quite smart and intelligent and having a lot of research backing up what he's saying, it seems quite ridiculous that he would say something like that.
well, I think
Yes?
that is
Because,
ridiculous. Yes, I don't
well, do you
disagree.
think it's intentional even? Do you think that he's trying to make a commentary on Russia? What is its territory and what is not
I
its
mean, there's
territory?
theories that actually all of this is to divert attention from the Epstein affair. You know, it would be quite elaborate if that's the case, but nothing's impossible in this world. So anyway, they're at the US Air Force Base, which is actually designed to monitor incoming ICBMs from Russia and all the defense of the US. So it's ironic that a war criminal, the head of Russia, is attending this Air Force Base summit, and Sergei Lavrov, who is the foreign minister of Russia, was wearing a Soviet Union T-shirt when he arrived in Russia. So this is all scary stuff, and this goes to their mindset of what they think of Russia, and now it's, getting back to the Soviet Union. So anyway, Trump greeted Putin warmly with a red carpet and Air Force One. And again, there's been lots of criticism this was war criminal and pandering up to him, and whether this devalues the presidency of the US, etc. So anyway, Putin looked rather pleased, as he would, because, he got the photo opportunity and coming in from the cold. And then they had the meeting.
They did have the meeting. And look, I think I would say as well, there's been a lot of media commentary on the fact that there was even a red carpet rolled out for him. I mean, what extravagant, honestly, F word, ridiculous events to be taking place. Because, okay, fine, welcome a war criminal who has International Criminal Court arrests out for him for multiple lots of war crimes, for invading foreign territories without any reason to, any justification, for being the cause of, hundreds of thousands of deaths at this point and hundreds of thousands of war crimes in itself. And then you get to the point where someone's greeting you with a red carpet. I mean, all right, have a conversation, have a summit, but you don't need a red carpet. That's just showing a level of respect and this elegance, and what's even the word for that when you have lots of glitz and glam?
You're trying to impress and you're trying to...
No, but it's almost just showing Trump's obsession with money and
Yep.
with power.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
he has respect for Putin, not as a leader of a country, but simply because he is incredibly wealthy and has lots of power, not about the impact that he's having on other people. So I guess he thinks to himself, look, this billionaire is coming to America. We need to give him a billionaire's welcome, regardless of anything else that he's done. Or his moral character.
Anyway, interesting stuff. And so they had the meeting, and the result of the meeting was no deal. Okay. But generally, the discussion went about that Russia wants eastern Ukraine, the Donetsk region, etc. They already control 70% of it.
Donbass region.
Donbass region, where Donetsk is. They already control 70% of it. And so fundamentally, they want Ukraine to give up the other 30% of that area, and that would be the new border. And then Russia will give back a few other small areas where in other parts of the Ukraine area.
Namely where? There have been absolutely no Russian territories that have been named that they are going to be willing to give up to Ukraine.
There are a few smaller areas to the north, and I can't name the areas, but to the north there.
Connected to Ukraine?
Yes.
Okay, well, I just don't think that there's any chance in hell of that happening. And I think that most people who are really in the debates and then discussions are saying that. I think this is just Trump covering his ass because he said that it's going to be a swapping of territories and he needs something to back it up.
Yeah, there will be swapping of territories if the Europeans...
It's not a swap.
Well, it's a change.
It's not going to end up being a swap. It's them demanding pushing Zelensky into handing over territory unwillingly and unconstitutionally to Russia.
Yeah, but they're losing ground anyway, and if it goes on for much longer, they'll continue to lose ground. So this is the dilemma for Ukraine and Western Europe, right? Part of the thing, one of the good things supposedly that came out of the meeting was a security guarantee, an Article 5-like guarantee for Ukraine, not part of NATO, but if they're attacked by Russia, the US, together with the other European parties, will defend Ukraine. So that's what supposedly has come out of that, and that's something new. If that truly has come out, that's the security guarantee, which is obviously critical for any agreement.
Okay, so now, listeners, I'm going to ask you, this is the voice that the media is putting out, and this is this idea that Trump is putting out into the world, that he's done a good thing, right? That Article 5 is then a promise to Ukraine that this will not continue and that future actions by Russia will not continue either. Essentially, the only thing that Russia objected to within the NATO agreement and within Ukraine joining NATO was Article 5 itself. Was other European countries having the ability to rush to Ukraine's defense. This new security agreement seems orientated around America and around America being able to support Ukraine in certain situations.
Not just America. As I read it, Freddie, and as I've read about this, it also allows Ukraine to rearm. It also allows the UK and France to put boots on the ground to defend the new border. So if that's true, all of that's true, that's very good from a security guarantee point of view.
Ask you again, how does it make any real sense? How is it better than joining NATO? There must be some fine print. There must be something we don't know, because they're saying that you're going to get the same security guarantees that you would be getting if you were joining NATO. So then why
Fundamentally,
can't they join NATO? There
because
must be something that Putin knows and Trump knows that we don't know, because Putin would not be okay with this.
okay, well, Putin's certainly not okay with them formally joining NATO, but them
But why
informally
is he okay
joining
with
NATO
this?
he's okay with. Supposedly. Well, I don't know. I wasn't in the meeting,
But
but
that's what I'm saying. You weren't in the room. We weren't in the room. And I think that everyone should think it's quite suspicious that he's suddenly agreeing to something that essentially has the same terms as NATO, which he has despised for over the past 20 years or more, basically his entire political career. He has wanted the end of NATO and has ridiculed its expansion into Eastern Europe.
Freddie, think about he's not in an incredibly strong position either. This has been incredibly damaging for the Russian economy, okay? And, hundreds of thousands of people killed, right? If he can come out of this with all of the Donbas region, right, and he's seen as that as a win for Putin, it's probably a good thing for him, and he's gained all that territory, right? And, he lives to play another day.
Yes, but that's not the result which is okay for the Ukrainian people. That's not an okay result. We can't accept this. And also, I have done some of my reading. There are particular articles in the Ukrainian constitution that says that you cannot give up territory. There is no way to do it unless you conduct a referendum in the entire country and also the parliament agrees to it. And 70% of Ukrainian people I think it's 90% believe that no territory should ever be given up to Russia.
Look, I
Do you
get all
see
that.
how the only thing that has kept Ukraine going throughout this war was their national pride and their belief that they can, retain their territory and retain their culture and push back against Russian oppression? If you're just going to hand over massive territories of Ukraine, that is such a blow to their optimism and to their hope that I think it could destroy the cause for good. I think you can't stop fighting. Like you just said a mere minute ago, Russia has also been damaged by this war, economically, militarily, socially as well. It's gotten to the point where people do begin to question, why are all their sons dying? Why are their family members dying for this war happening in a far-off country that they haven't necessarily laid eyes on before and which isn't in their direct, region? So I think that it has had more of an impact on Russia than you think. And look, we don't live in Russia. You know how powerful a propaganda machine can be, yes? And you would think that since we barely ever get any media out of Russia, surely the propaganda machine is to a ridiculous extent.
Agree, but, Russia is in the ascendancy in this war. They're gaining territories slowly against Ukraine. If no deal is achieved here, the US might take their toys home as well. And the Europeans still haven't stepped up to the point where they can replace the US. Yeah, and this is the fundamental challenge. Clearly, in the upcoming discussions, and Zelensky is heading to Washington as we speak with his posse of European leaders because he doesn't want to repeat.
I mean, I think they're hardly his posse. I don't think they've shown him the respect even that they should be.
Well, the fact that they're going with him is really good. So Keir Starmer, Prime Minister of UK, Emmanuel Macron, French President, Friedrich Merz, Chancellor of Germany, Angela von der Leyen,
Ursula von der Leyen.
Ursula von der Leyen. What did I say? Angela. I'm thinking
Angela.
I'm confusing. I'm getting confused with Angela Merkel
With the old
and Ursula
days.
von der Leyen. The old days. Mark Rutte and Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy. So it'll be fascinating, right? Because this is probably the most significant global meeting since the end of the Second World War for the European allies together with the US.
Well, interestingly enough, it's the first of its kind in the era that we live in now, a wartime meeting of the main leading powers, I guess you could say, of this region. We haven't seen a wartime meeting, the likes of this, of these powers who were so instrumental in World War I and World War II. So it's fascinating to see how they will come to the table and express themselves. I just personally believe that these two regions, yes, it is Luhansk and Donetsk, like you were saying, that make up the Donbas region, that yes, they have been overtaken by Russia.
70% or something.
But in the agreement so far, there is no way to certify that Russia is not going to use the land that they are gaining to just build up their troops and amass another military campaign from their newfound borders. So that's the problem that most people have, is that most strategists who are looking at this, there is nothing in the agreement that says they can't put their military along those borders and continue the war from then on. This is just hitting Ukraine where it hurts. Yes, Russia is slowly encroaching on Ukraine, but in my mind, I think this is giving them something that maybe is inevitable, but giving it to them right now rather than in a year or so. You know what I mean? And that will just give them the advantage because they go from being here to being here and they can keep pushing forward. There is nothing that's going to stop Putin from wanting to invade Ukraine. The whole reason for this war is unjustified in the first place. It's very clear that he just believes that Ukraine should be part of Russian
He
territory.
does. No,
It's an
that's no
imperialist
news.
doctrine.
Of course he does.
Yeah, no, of course. It's an imperialist doctrine, this idea that, the Soviet Union used to encompass this amount of space and therefore Russia to this day and
Not
age
just
should
that
do the
space,
same.
but many other
No,
countries.
I know, and many other countries, and I think that there's nothing that will stop him from continuing to
What do you
fight for
think will
that.
come out? Okay, so what do you think the agreement will be? If there's an agreement, what do you think it will be?
I think that Zelensky, if he agreed, I don't think he's ever going to agree to giving up territory, but I think if he agreed, he would be seen almost as a traitor by the Ukrainian people because it's such a disrespectful act and
No,
goes
but what do you
against
think's
everything
gonna
that he
happen?
stood for in his entire leadership. Can you stop trying to undermine me by just asking me the most ridiculous, difficult question to determine possible? You're trying to ask me what do I think will happen at the greatest, most important wartime meeting to happen in the last 30 years, and you think that I can predict it perfectly on the spot? Give me a second, please. What do you think will happen? I can go after you.
Okay, sure. What I think will happen, I don't think Zelensky and the Europeans will agree to the whole of eastern Ukraine, i.e. Russia controls 70% today. I think that's likely to be with some adjustment where it's agreed the new border is, where Russia is today. I mean, apart from if you're halfway through a city and that sort of thing, that needs to be resolved, right? And I don't think Ukraine's going to give up the rest of the 30% of eastern Ukraine, right? So that together with security guarantees, I believe the Europeans will accept.
But I don't necessarily believe that Zelensky will accept.
So you
But
don't think there'll be a deal then?
I guess we now get to the point, though, that if Zelensky doesn't accept, then do the European leaders threaten to withdraw their troops and withdraw their support? I think is the real question, right? And then you get to the whole question of how worried are they for their own safety in terms of Russia and in terms of how Russia will affect them. Because, I mean, we look to Poland. Do you think of the Polish question in all of this, how close they are to Russian borders as well? You think of Latvia and Estonia and Moldova and the rest of the countries around the Black Sea, because Russia in recent years has strengthened incredibly their military presence in the Black Sea, taking masses of coastline that belongs to Georgia and other countries around there without any interference from other countries or from the military from these countries, because they're unable to fight back because Russia is just so powerful. So it's just this question. They are going to keep pushing. Do the Europeans have fear that they're going to keep pushing until the point where they're on their doorstep? Or do they believe that it will stop, at some far off country before it gets to them? I think it's how scared they are which will determine the outcome.
I think the Europeans are scared, but I think they want the majority of Ukraine to remain as the bulwark against Russia. And that's in their interest to do that, right? They certainly don't want the whole of Ukraine falling, because then Russia is right on the NATO doorstep, right? So strategically they want, and my sense is they will accept the line where the Russians are today, because the theory is if Russia's in the ascendancy, they're going to slowly gain more ground anyway. Whether Zelensky survives in the future or not, it's unlikely in my view that he will as the leader of Ukraine, right? Once it's, this is often what happens in wartime situations. Once a peace is agreed, whether you think that's right or wrong or the right thing, I mean, I think he's been an incredible hero and done an amazing job. But we've got to be realistic about the situation the world is in here. And I just don't see the alternative. What is the alternative proposal?
I think the alternative in an ideal world if the leaders were doing what they should be doing, how it could help. The Europeans need to amass a massive force, redirect all their military towards Russia, get on the front lines and push from there, and not try and come to any agreements with Putin whatsoever, because there's nothing that he's going to
Well,
agree to that will stop
Freddie,
his advance, in my
you're quite
opinion.
right. I mean, the rest of the world could bring Russia to its knees economically,
Yeah.
but I just don't think the US is willing to do that in this scenario. That is the inhibitor of that, because of course, if they put all these tariffs on all these countries buying oil, and that Russia was making no money from selling oil, their economy would collapse.
No, I know, and I completely agree with that. And I think, look, it brings me back to when the American election was happening, and you as well, I'm fairly sure, I literally sat in front of the TV for like 14 hours watching the polls come in, watching the votes come in across America. And I've never been that in tune with an election before, even the Australian ones, and people ask you, why do you care so much? It's just America. That seems strange that you would care. Americans kind of ask, why do you care? It's not your country, what impact it is going to have. But at that point in time, I really strongly believed that it would be the end of Ukraine, and that it would be the end of the plight of the people in Gaza, because America from then on would do nothing to protect these people. And I think that's what we've been shown, that it's a act, really. Trump does the minimal amount that he has to do to act like a president, but he
Yes.
does nothing more than that.
No, that's true. It's all
And
very
he's not
short
willing
term.
to sacrifice anything to stand up for
It's all
another
very
country.
short term. It's very photo op, wanting to get the deal done. Okay. And so they're going to be pushing very hard to get the deal. And so it will be fascinating, the interplay between the European leaders and Trump. It'll just
Yeah,
be one of the
definitely.
more fascinating meetings I think you'll ever see in our lifetimes, right? Potentially. It's fascinating.
I mean, it really will be. And I'll just add one more thing, I think, before we wrap up. Obviously, in the next episode or in the following episodes, we can go into everything that's happening with the meeting and etc. and really dissect it. But another quite interesting thing that happened is that Melania Trump, obviously the First Lady of America, and Donald Trump's husband, wrote a letter to Putin addressing the fact that I think over a ridiculous amount, maybe over 200,000 children have been deported, have been sent to Russia. Children have been taken from orphanages and care homes and disability homes and adopted by Russian parents and sent to Russian military academies, right? And, with the aim of destroying Ukrainian culture and turning these Ukrainian children against their very country and their very people. Trump has actually written a letter to Putin saying, I would like you to reflect on your own humanity and stand up for humanity, not merely your country, but for everyone, and take a stand and think about these children and the impact you're having on them, which is rather surprising.
It's not
I would
surprising,
say.
Freddie. It's really wonderful. It's really a good thing. She's from Slovakia, so she comes from Eastern Europe. Okay, so she feels this, I think, quite personally and deeply, because she comes from Eastern Europe, and she realizes what life was like for her parents under Russian control. So I think she takes this quite personally, and it was great that Donald Trump had to pass on her letter to Putin.
But that's just my question, is that I understand that she would take it personally, and I kind of, I respect that, and that's not shocking to me. The shocking thing is that Donald Trump actually took that letter and passed it on to Putin. And I know that we've heard in the media as well that he does have a soft spot for children in a rather strange way. I mean, we don't know if he has a soft spot in that way, if you know what I mean, but he has a soft spot in the way that he doesn't believe that they should be going through torture or indecent situations. When shown pictures of the children in Gaza, he recoiled and didn't enjoy it. So maybe this is showing how he does have some empathy, even if it's limited, towards the children in Ukraine, and that he allowed Melania to send this message because of that. But yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah.
No, it's a nice sort of positive way to perhaps end our podcast. A little positive news there. And next episode, we will get into all the details of what actually happens during this meeting. So stay tuned, and lovely chatting to you, Freddie. Hope everyone has a great week, and speak soon.
Bye. See you later.
Bye.